Welcome back to another Spirit Island video. In this video, I'll be doing a Many Minds Spirit Guide. As you guys have seen in my previous Spirit Guides, I usually do a series. I believe it's between 1 and like 6 videos, and I talk about the spirit, and then I do a bunch of gameplay videos after that. I'm going to be putting more time into these videos. Hopefully, it helps people out. Um, I I try to be as much of a perfectionist as I can, so I'll try to cover more aspects of the spirit than my previous videos. Okay, with that being said, let's get started and let's look at Many Minds. This is the front side of the spirit board. You start with a single presence and an extra beast in the land with beasts. You are a heavily beast movement user. You have some push gathers, lots of beast movement. Um, this is the summary of powers. You are a moderate complexity spirit. You do use beasts. This is the bars that they give. They say that you're low offense, high control, middle fear, or I guess above middle fear, above middle defense, and then low utility. Just in comparison to the other beast spirit in the game, Sharp Fangs, which is primarily significantly more offense, less control, more fear, less defense, and about the same utility. I don't actually think these values are correct for Many Minds, so up here I've made some adjustments. Basically, the red is a decrease in the bar, and then a blue is an increase. I think Many Minds has a little bit less control than they're giving it. I think they're counting Dreadful Tide as a control card. I consider it more defense. Regardless, you really only have two control pieces here. Um, Fear, I think you're one of the best fear spirits in the game, outside of maybe, I think Bringer is like the only thing that can beat this thing. But then again, Bringer, the fear is pretty inconsistent, while Many Minds can consistently get the best fear at the table. So this is probably the strongest fear spirit in the game, especially when you factor in like those beast fear majors. Um, Defense, I also think you're one of the best defensive spirits in the game. I think there's very few spirits that kind of beat Many Minds defensively. You do have a skip. You do have a bedevilment. I guess bedevilment is a utility, but you have a skip as well as a right innate that's heavy defense based. You then have very little utility. I'm not exactly sure what they count as utility. I'm going to count bedevilment as utility. Basically, that's support you give out. But you have bedevilment and then also multiplying swarm. So that's two cards that either support the team or add tokens. So I think Many Minds' utility bar should be at least a little bit more than Fangs. So this would be my estimate. Summary powers. I mean, this really doesn't matter. I just think this is a little bit more accurate for the experience that you're going to get with Many Minds. So let's flip over the board. And Many Minds move is 1. You have 3 special, I guess actually 2 special rules. Fly fast as thought. Whenever you gather or push beasts, they may come or go to lands that are up to 2 distance away rather than the adjacent land. This rule is incredibly important. So let me explain what that is. So looking up here at the spirit board here, if I'm choosing to use this innate, or not this innate, but if I'm choosing to gather stuff into my D6, regardless of range, I can gather all beasts. Well, assuming it's gathering beasts. If it's a beast gather or a beast push, I can push up to 2 range. So I could gather this beast from D3 into D6 because it's 2 range. Well, usually you have to be just adjacent, and that is because of that special rule. I'll better clarify that with some examples in a little bit. The next special rule you have is a joining of swarms and flocks. It says that your sacred sites also count as beasts. It says you never have more than a single sacred site in a land, no matter how many presents you have there. If something changes a beast that is considered your sacred site, it affects both of your presence there instead. What does that mean? So if I have a sacred site, the sacred site here on my E6 now counts as a beast. So on E6, I have 3 beasts there. Now, I can always choose to have the sacred site count as a beast or not as a beast for pretty much any action. So if I want it to count as a beast, I can do that, or I can choose to not count it as a beast. And that will matter for cards like Dreadful Tide, for cards like Pursue, for event cards, stuff like that. Looking at your growth options, you're a 0 to 1, 0 to 1. And what does that mean? That means you are not placing presents on your G1. You will place 2 presents on your G2. And then on G3, you are placing a single presence, but then you have some basically some bonus extra things that you gain. This is very important because the tracks are designed for a 0 to 1, and there's several, I guess, points where you'll use this 2 growth to kind of jump across your tracks to reach certain breakpoints. Looking at your tracks, you have you max out at 4 energy and 5 plays. That's very, very strong, at least the plays. Having 5 plays puts you in the upper end of spirit plays. You're able to pay 2 energy to gain power cards. Very, very critical. And I think this is genius design, as it allows many minds to accumulate more cards while playing plays. And it doesn't, it's just very, I don't know, it's just very, very well designed. On top track, you get the 2 extra elements as well as the energy. I really think Many Minds is the best designed spirit in the game at this point. You have 2 innates. You have an innate that allows you to move beasts, and an innate that uses beasts as defend and generates a lot of fear. It's important to point out that both of these innates have 2 range, which I tend to forget a lot. I always think the range is 1. It probably could have been 1 and it wouldn't have mattered really. But it's 2 range. So the first tier of this innate says you may gather up to 1 beast. Well, remember our special rule, it allows you to gather a beast up to 2 distant away. So if I'm using the teeming host arrives, and I'm using it over here on my D6, I can choose to gather, let's say, 1 beast into that D6, or I can gather an adjacent beast from maybe my E6. Now, I could instead utilize my special rule, adjoining of swarms and flocks, counting this sacred site as a beast, and I can choose to gather that beast instead. Now, this is where things get very interesting, and that's that second tier. And it says instead gather up to 1 beast per heir you have. Now that is always going to be at least 3. I've had it as most as 6. But basically you get to gather a ton of beasts into that land, and this is really your key to setting up your defense and your cards in your hand, basically setting up a Dreadful Tide or setting up a card like Pursue. So if we have this tier, let's say we just have 3 heir, we can gather up to 3 beasts. So let's say I gather this beast from D3, I gather this beast from A1, and then I gather my sacred site from E6. And as you can see, I've gathered 3 beasts in here, and then now I can plan to use some of my cards for that land. Now, this is where I think, well, for a lot of players, I think this is where they struggle, is this last threshold here. And it's 1 fire, 4 air, and 2 animal. It says push up to 3 beasts from that target land. Now remember, we can also utilize that fly fast, so we can actually push them further than where they normally can go. And these 2 thresholds are really important because they allow you to put beasts into 2 different lands. Really important, I'm trying to emphasize this, with a single action. Okay, so how does that work? Let's now assume I have 4 air. I'm going to choose this on D6. I can gather up to 4 beasts. 1, 2, 3, 4. I then get to push up to 3 of those beasts. I'm now going to choose to push, let's say, these 2 beasts into this jungle over here on A8. I've now managed to move beasts with my left innate into 2 different lands, and this is really important because this is how Many Minds gets ahead. Once you can access this movement, you're able to set up beasts into multiple lands to basically impact 2 lands at once. So looking here, what does that do? Well, now I can use maybe my Dreadful Tide to skip a Ravage action here on A8, and maybe I can then use my Pursue to push stuff out of my D6. Important to point out, once again, I used my when you gather or push beasts to move up to 2 distance. I decided to push my beasts up to 2 range over here. And as you can see here, Many Minds just has incredible mobility. I'm just resetting the board here, but I just want to show you this left innate here. If I choose my D6, I can hit any of the black dots with my beast push. In addition, I can hit all of board D. What do I mean by that? If I gather beasts, let's say I'm going to once again gather all of those beasts, those 4 beasts. I then get to push these beasts up to 2 range away. Look at how many different lands I can impact, and this is one of the reasons why Many Minds is so powerful. It can literally just be anywhere. And look, you could also hit all aboard D as well. Just insane. Let's erase those lines here. I can actually, there we go. We could also erase the red. And as you can see, that's just very, very powerful. Now, the red innate is where you are going to be generating a lot of fear as well as defend. Now, it's going to be checking. Not only do you have to get the elements, you also have to get the beasts. So this is where setting up your beasts via that left innate is so important. In addition, you have to target a land with invaders. This is something that some players forget. Remember, it has to have a lot of beasts also in a land with invaders. A lot of times I might have a land that has 3 beasts but no invaders, or it may have 2 beasts with invaders, and I'll have to opt to use this 2 fear defend 2 in that land that only has 2 invaders, or not invaders with 2 beasts, rather than the land that has 3 beasts but no invaders, and that's because of this targeting restriction. A lot of times you'll use defend up to this level here. I rarely get this defensive level, but it sometimes comes up in like a very late part of the game. As you guys can see here, this left innate allows you to move a lot of beasts to set up this right innate here. So looking at the growth options here, a lot of times I just use G2, and you're going to see this in my opening guide. I spend there are 3 builds that you can use with Many Minds, and they all spam G2, and you're going to be in great shape. I actually think if you just play Many Minds with G2, you're going to win all of your games once you've mastered the Spirit. The Spirit is very powerful, so just utilizing G2 is good enough. Now, G3, when you utilize G3, this adds extra elements to the Spirit that make it more dynamic, more interesting, more fun. It also makes it more complex. I think I would probably put the Spirit at around high complexity if I'm utilizing that G3 more. Now, what does the G3 do? Let me set up here, and I will have an opening guide in video 3 that will talk about utilizing G3 as well. So a lot of times, if you're going to be using G3, you'll use that turn 1, and then you'll use G2 a lot. So why would I ever want to use G3? Well, the reason is Many Minds likes to play at the tempo of the invaders. You want to be impacting problems that have come up on the board. And I just mentioned how this Leptonate teaming, the teaming host, getting beasts into 2 lands is really critical because that allows you to basically solve 2 problems, right? Well, G3 basically lets you do that turn 1 for free at the expense, well, not for free. It's at the expense of growing 1 less presence. What do I mean by that? Well, it says you get to add a presence at 3 range as well as a beast. So now, if I need to, let's say I'm playing on board E, now I guess let's say board E, and I need to deal with both A8 as well as E8. I can choose to G3 here, putting a presence there and a beast, So now I'm able to access this land, and then I get to gather a beast into, I guess it could be this land, but it actually could be any land up to 2. So I could then choose maybe E3, gathering a beast. Actually, let's say I gather this beast. Actually, it'll look like this instead. So now I've actually I couldn't do that because this is not a beast. So let me put that back. I'd gather this beast. But now you can see I've basically got beasts into 2 different lands. So now I'm better set up for that next turn when I need to defend. And I'll better explain this in the opening guide. Basically, it puts you ahead of tempo of the invaders. Because now, instead of using this gather to move into a land that's ravaging this turn, I can instead use it to move into a land that's building, and I can try to get ahead that way. Now, like I said, I don't think I'm not actually sure if it's better or worse. I've had such good success moving, just spamming G2. It's hard for me to say that G3 builds are better when I know G2 builds are so effective. But but G3 definitely opens up more possibilities, and it might actually be true that G3 is overall better on that turn one, but I'll need to actually play more games with it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else about this video that I want to mention. Um, Cards are in the next video. Talked about both innates. Power level. So Many Minds' power level, I rate it as 5 or 6 out of a total of 68 spirits in the entire game. That includes the Nature's Incarnate expansion. That includes Jagged Earth. That includes all expansions. I think in one of the tier lists I have it rated as number 5. But basically, it and one of the new spirits, Towering Roots, is actually my favorite spirit right now. But both Roots and Many Minds keep flopping between these two spots. They're both very powerful. They do different things. But right now, I think Many Minds I have rated as 5, but maybe it'll drop down to 6 at some point again. So if you guys like this video, like, subscribe for more content. I'll continue doing these guides. I'll put more time into them, and hopefully you guys enjoy them.